move. So moved by Member Guy, seconded by Member Cousins. Any matters arising from the minutes? Okay, can we invite in the team from the Ministerial? Yes, Member Hero.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. I found it very not so pleasing, Mr. Chairman, when an email is sent out to us like a day before a meeting for us to make a decision. I am one of those persons. I'm a farmer. And therefore, when I go out in the mornings, sometimes I don't even bother to take up the phone, more so to check emails. And the emails that are sent out, I think it is under your auspice that it is sent out, right?
All right, let me explain the context
Please.
of that. Yeah. Just prior to the last meeting, the day before the meeting, I indicated to the committee clerk that I wanted her to invite the ministry's rep on the internal audit committee and also it's not the chief internal auditor, but another person. At that point in time, she indicated that she couldn't issue the invitation without the permission of the members of the committee. Now, because of that, she said the only way they could be invited is if she got all the members to agree to such a proposal. So when I spoke to her in the morning, she sent out an email sometime about 10 in the morning, which would have been Monday, asking members if they could confirm their agreement with inviting the additional 2 persons. She had given a deadline of 4 because obviously if there was an agreement, she would need to inform the persons that evening to have them be here. At the time, there were 2 members who answered in the affirmative, and I think subsequent to the deadline, I saw a response from Member Charles. So given that we didn't have the majority, we couldn't invite the members. So that was the context within which that email was sent out.
Mr. Chairman, I know you to be a very fair person. I don't want to lose that. So you have to help me because, well, you give an explanation. Accept it.
No, I would tell you frankly, I thought the committee clerk on our own could have invited the 2 persons because they are members of the civil service, but she indicated the rules dictate that the majority of the members must agree. And for obvious reasons, which I think are apparent now, I didn't want to proceed in the meeting, given that there were so many issues raised about the internal audit without those 2 key individuals there, which is why at the last meeting, I asked for the permission of the members to have the persons come. And in essence, that's why we put off last week's meeting.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you see, precedence is something that we have to follow. And if we set it, we expect it to be followed. The standing orders speak to certain things that we have to get a consensus from committee and really not a round-robin situation. And so I would appreciate it going forward that we take that decision at the committee meeting so it can be minuted. And so we'll see who say aye and who say nay.
Which was done last week.
Fine. So, but the invitation of the other persons would have been done via email.
No, let me just be clear. So, having not gotten the majority of the members to agree, I then brought it to the meeting last week, and the meeting agreed last week to invite the 3 individuals actually, and I assume they're going to be here today.
Because from now on, take the necessary decisions at the meetings rather than round robin.
Chairman.
I know, but what I would say, Member Clark, is that...
I leave it at...
No, I know, but you're raising it, and I feel I have a responsibility to respond. given in reviewing the documents and looking at the issues which arose, I felt at the time, and it would have been the day before our scheduled meeting, that the two individuals would add value to the meeting. And that is why I sought the round robin. It's not my practice to use that as the method of conducting the meeting. But given that we couldn't get a decision, we came to the meeting last week and we got the confirmation from the members.
Chairman.
Yes, Member Guy.
I feel as to why the member is having such a almost in labor pains about this particular route. There are circumstances, and you would have known, as all of our members, that the documents relating to some of the answers arrived late, which would not have given us sufficient time at any meeting to have dealt with. Recall that the prior meeting, the decision was then taken to invite the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. The response from the ministry subsequently came to the members of the committee by email. So in that circumstances, having read it, the only decision that could have been taken was to do it by email. So whereas it's not the usual protocol, it is one of the avenues that have been utilized before, even in the previous PAC on which the member sat as well. So it's not a matter of precedence or anything. I think it is good order. And I also think it is good order that, in fact, the other members were alerted, they were emailed in that particular piece of missive that was sent out. And it ought not to have to be detaining us at this time.
Mr. Chairman, it will detain us. It will detain us if the argument that my fellow colleague is putting forward, because guess what? When we go outside of the standing orders and do things, it follows us and it will come back to haunt us. The standing orders speak to certain things and we must deal with it accordingly. I have sat in this house and I've seen where going outside of the standing order has caused some discomfort. Let us not continue down that path, Mr. Chairman.
But respectfully, I don't know who is going outside of the standing orders.
That's all I'm saying, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
but I haven't gone outside of the standing orders. I brought the matter here.
I accept what you said before,
right.
But no, what member guy is now saying, Mr. Chairman, is telling me that we must nip it in the bud now. Make we stop it now.
But I don't know about stopping something when there hasn't been a breach. It was brought properly to the meeting. I'll come into you. Yes.
To you and to the secretary when she came afterwards for PAC that I wasn't able to respond to the email. I was flabbergasted when I got out of PAC, Chairman, and realized that the media called you and you rudely indicated that we have an objection to inviting the internal auditors. I was shocked and I was very disappointed, because it means I can't trust you as a chairman. When the question was asked, without any of us knowing that you had consulted with the media to say the fact that we didn't respond means that we have an objection, and to think the moment it came, we all raised our hands. I went to the Auditor General and I said, I believe we must have the internal auditors here. I went to you and said the same. So I was shocked that behind our back as the chairman, you would take us not responding to an email as an indication that we are in objection and we do not support. And you need to stop it, Mr. Chairman, because very often a message is sent to the media which goes to the public that betrays all honesty, the circumstances. and then we are forced to live with it. If you do it again, Mr. Chairman, we are going to insist that only at the meeting, which is what is required, we make our decisions.
That is my point.
If we cannot trust you, Mr. Chairman, if you ever do it again, because nothing prevents you, Mr. Chairman, when you realize you have that email, from calling your fellow member of the committee. However, none of us received a call. None of us were asked, how comes you haven't responded? But you had time to go to the media. So when I saw it, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I didn't see it on the day. I was pissed.
You know, I take strong objection. I take strong objection to what the member said. An email was sent out by the clerk on my instruction asking members to respond. 2 members responded in that. Two members, Member Cousins and Member Guy. But the email went to all members.
Mr. Chairman, if you are saying that the email went out less than 24 hours before we were supposed to read that email and to make a decision, the only 2 persons who responded at the time, Mr. Chairman, are the 2 persons that are aligned to the party that the chairman is supporting.
Chairman, I
don't know why the members are going down this road. I don't know why these members are going down this road.
I had asked you earlier, just to make it slide and make it just go by the books as of now. But you resist the situation.
I resisted. The member Member Holness has made accusations, which I took offense to.
Mr. Chairman,
about members going behind people's back and consulting with the media.
Before Member Holness
I took offense to that.
Before Member Holness came, Member Guy had made some statement, and I said to you, Mr. Chairman, be careful of the precedents that we set. 2 members responded, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think you have my number. You could have given me a call, just as how the other 2 get it.
No. The email went to every single member.
Chairman, just to make it clear,
yes,
I
member.
did not receive a phone call from you or anybody else in regard to this matter. I received an email and I responded to the email that was received. I take exception to what the members have heard to earlier as it relates to some conspiracy between us on this side. No, I'm going to use it because you have heard to it. And you cannot member avert to any conspiracy like that. All of us received an email. I responded to the email.
Are you sure that I received the email?
Well, you must know what you want to do. But I received the email, I responded accordingly. And I take exception to that. And we shouldn't be detaining ourselves now with this issue. We have bigger fish to fry than that. You're making a, Chairman, the member is making a mountain out of a molehill. We have bigger issues to deal with, national issues.
And I must tell you, I take strong offense to what Member Holness has said about me conspiring with the media and going behind the back of the committee to conspire with the media. I take strong offense to that. An email was sent out. 2 people responded out in time. Member Charles responded after, right? I brought the matter to the committee. The committee approved.
Mr. Chairman, did you speak to the media?
I spoke to the media the day before the committee meeting.
Did you make mention that it seems as if the government members are hiding away or renewing?
I did not. I don't control.
What was it?
Hold on. I don't control what the media reports, you know. I don't control what the media reports. And I take offense to any suggestion that I tell the media what to report. I don't tell the media what to report. So when I'm told that I'm conspiring with the media, I take strong offense to that. I don't control what the media reports. And I don't know why we have We have spent 10, 15 minutes on this matter when we have substantive matters to deal with.
See?
Having not gotten the response, the matter came properly here and the committee approved. And the persons are invited.
Mr. Chairman, it's not the invitation, it is a principle. The principle on which. That is what the argument is about this morning.
And the principle is what, sir?
You know, Mr. Chairman, you have been here longer than I am.
No, what is the principle?
You're more well-read than I am.
No, what is the principle you're referring to? Can we invite the
Mr.
members?
Chairman, before you invite
yeah.
the members, I would seek to have the members show me which part in the standing orders he's referring to as to how the invitation is done. And secondly, my understanding of what the precedence in the committee has been, and yes, I've been here a long time too, member, that the decision of the committee is what ministry or what agency is to be invited. Now, I do concur with you, Chairman, is that the membership of the committee was not even required to request a member of the ministry to attend along with the chief accounting officer to come to this committee. That has never been a problem before. And as I said, I'd invite the member to tell me which section of the standing orders refer to that.
Can we invite the members from the Ministry of Labour inside?
Before we leave, we're going to vote on it. I feel it was highly disrespectful because Chairman could have even said, you know, I didn't realize that you were not able to respond, and I've already gone to the media with comments that would be anti or adverse to the position that took place. And if the Chairman continues to hold firm to his position and the members from the opposition side, I would say going forward, our decisions are made at meetings. And since we do not need to be consulted, then you don't need to consult us on what you do not think is necessary to consult the government on, because you had an elaborate time to sit down with the media to come to a conclusion that the government members had blocked or were not interested in having the internal auditors here, which was a lie.
Member Holness, I resent you associating the other government members because two different points are in front of us now. And I was, for one particular instance, addressing one concern. Yours is another. So I would humbly request that you refrain from associating the members of the opposition with the notion that you're having just now.
Can we invite the members from the ministry officials in? Welcome, Madam Permanent Secretary. Could you introduce the members who are here from the ministry?
Okay. Morning, members, morning, Chairman, members of the Auditor General's Department, Ministry of Finance. This morning, I have with me Ms. Portia Magnus, Director, National Insurance, and I'll just ask the individual just to put up their hand. Mr. Jason Anderson, who is to my right, Principal Financial Officer for the Ministry. Ms. Elsa Marks Willis, Project Director for the PATH project. Dave McIntosh, Transition Manager, National Insurance Fund, Mr. Ludlow Bowie, Director Real Estate, Mr. Owen Whiteley, Director Administration, Ms. Cydia Madden, Chief Internal Auditor for the Ministry, and Ms. Deborah Patrick Gardner, Chief Technical Director assigned to the Ministry. And there is also Ms. Kate Bertram, who chairs the Ministry's Internal Audit Committee.
Thank you. Madam Deputy AG, could you introduce your team? Oh, sir, sorry. Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Marlon McAdam, Deputy Auditor General, and with me today, Mrs. Kay Lou Lim, Deputy AG, Mr. Ricardo Hall, Acting Deputy AG, and we are supported by Principal Auditors, Mr. Deslan McKenzie, Ms. Iselin Cooper, and Ms. Hyacinth Williams. Thank you.
Ms. Blake.
Right. Hope Blake, Deputy Financial Secretary. To my right is Suzette Campbell, who is the head of the Directorate with responsibility for internal audit policy and procedures. And right beside me here to the left is Yvette Brown, head of the unit responsible for public sector reform policy.
Thank you, members. Madam PS, I want to start by looking at the Auditor General's assessment of the Ministry's internal audit reports. And in it, in the response from the Ministry, you had indicated that a number of the internal audit reports were not brought to your attention.
On a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Member Clerk.
This document was handed to me this morning. I want to know from my members, other members, is it that they're receiving it for the first time this morning?
I received it here. I don't believe we can consider it, given that it was only tabled today,
okay,
because nobody would have had an opportunity to peruse these documents. So I indicated to the clerk, and I'll say here that there's no way that you could ask members with no notice to read through the entire file.
Chairman, do you have any idea what is being conveyed in the files?
I don't know yet, but when the PS, I'll ask the PS if she can so indicate.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What the Ministry did, recognizing the short timeline that we had to submit our initial response to the PAC, during the past couple of days, we went through to provide additional documentation, evidential documentation to support some of our responses. So it is in fact evidence to support our responses. It's not things for the members to necessarily consider, but as we're going through a particular section of the Auditor General's report, the members may want to turn to a particular section to see the evidence.
And all of these documents were provided to the Auditor General's department?
It was provided this morning to the House, Chairman, and I will apologize for that.
Yes, Member Williams.
Yes. My position in relation to this late disclosure is that it cannot be said, with all due respect to the PS, it cannot be said that evidence, documents containing evidence being served at this juncture is not, I'm getting the impression from Madam PS, is that it is de minimis. It is not that significant, so we can still proceed. But I am thinking that if we are going to, the members of the committee, well, I can speak for myself. If I'm going to be properly prepared to ask questions and to make inquiries in relation to the Auditor General's report on the ministry's financial transactions, then I would really relish an opportunity to review the documents and the evidence, because it could be that we proceed and ask questions ignorant of the evidence, ignorant of the documentation provided, and then we get an egg in the face because
I'm agreeing with you, Member
questions
Williams.
that answers are already provided.
What I would say, I'm agreeing with you. It's not reasonable to expect that we can review this immediately, but I believe there is still enough that was presented to us prior to this that we had an opportunity to peruse that we can go through. So no person could expect that in a couple of minutes you can read this. But we have substantive matters that were before us before that I'd like us to start. I don't know that we'll complete everything today, and we can deal with some other matters maybe at another sitting. But I want to start on the substantive matters.
Very well, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Madam Pierce, I'm saying in the Auditor General's assessment of the Ministry's internal audit reports, the Ministry's response indicated that there were a number of the internal audit reports which were not brought to the attention of the accounting officer, which is yourself. Subsequent to that, we were sent by the Auditor General 2 letters, one dated July 31st, 2019 from the Audit Committee Chair, which was addressed to Ms. Suzette Campbell, and another letter dated February 27, 2019 from the Chief Technical Director, also addressed to you in relation to the audit report. So I need you to reconcile what seems to be 2 contradictory pieces of information in relation to, you're saying you didn't receive the internal audit reports and what seems to be documentation which suggests otherwise.
Chairman, at no time did I say I did not receive the internal audit reports. What I said was in reference to the 60 items, this list of 60 outstanding management responses. And what the committee needs to recognize is that there's a difference between external audit and internal audit. When the external Auditor General does its report, it is my responsibility as accounting officer to ensure that the matters are addressed and responses are provided, as we usually do. When it comes on to internal audits, I'm not saying that I'm not responsible, but the first line, it's usually the management, the line managers or the directors responsible for a particular area. Now, internal audit reports are usually sent to those directors. And at some point in time, usually on a quarterly basis, or if the internal auditors, for example, during the course of their audits, come across something that is really egregious that they feel they have to bring to my attention immediately, that is usually done. So I did not say that I don't get internal audit reports. My response to the committee was in reference to this list of 60 outstanding management responses.
All right, there are some members, member Holness, but before I invite the members, the July 31st, 2019 letter from Mrs. Kate Williams Bertram, who is the Audit Committee Chair, addressed to Suzette Campbell, was copied to you. On page 3 of the letter, it says, the committee's review of the reports for the period was hampered by the non-submission or non-inclusion of management responses in the audit reports examined. There exists approximately 90 audit findings observations that no response was provided, which covered the period June 2017 to September 2018. The Chief Internal Auditor prepared a comprehensive summary and submitted it to the Permanent Secretary and the Audit Committee. This was a letter sent July 31st, 2019, which you were copied on, which again indicates or alludes to the fact that the outstanding findings, 90 it says, were brought to your attention.
In 2019, and we're now in 2021, Chairman. The ministry is a dynamic ministry. Audit is continually auditing. So you will have audits done in 2018, 2017, 2019, 2020, and as we speak, I'm sure the internal auditors are doing audits. And as audits are done, responses are done. I will admit, because I'm not going to sit here and mislead the Parliament, I will admit that we do have some of our directors who may be slow to respond, Mr. Chairman.
So you're saying the 90 outstanding audit observations that were referenced in the July 2019 letter have been addressed, and then the 60 that have not been addressed are subsequent to that?
Mr. Chairman, I could not honestly tell you exactly. I would have to look at what the 98 are, or 90 whatever are, and today look at the 60. As I tell you, audit is dynamic. We're constantly auditing. People are constantly giving responses. There would have to be a reconciliation, Mr. Chairman, to see what was on that 98 and what at the time of the Auditor General's report was outstanding.
All right, Member Holness.
Thanks, Chairman. Chairman is asking some pertinent questions as it relates to resolving outstanding issues. But I would like to set a stage, Permanent Secretary. And I will separate internal audit from external audit. My question number one, and you're going to have to write the questions. Did the minister for the ministry at the time get any communication from the Permanent Secretary indicating that we have these internal control weaknesses that have been highlighted by internal audit that we're working on resolving? At any point in time, was any effort made to say these are our list of internal audit queries, these are the ones that we have been able to resolve, these are the issues that remain outstanding? Why I'm asking this is very often ministries come to the Parliament asking the ministers to provide a budget to improve the budget so that it facilitates your having adequate staff in the structure, so that it facilitates your putting in place what is necessary to resolve some of the systemic weaknesses that you have in your internal controls and management. And it wouldn't be expected that the Permanent Secretary would be able to sit down and review and follow up all the line managers. But it has taken you, even to present, an inability to be able to generate an audit report register, which would have answered the chairman's question in terms of someone, doesn't have to be you, sitting down now and monitoring the line managers and getting the responses. And usually there are dates given to say, look, we are expecting your response in 3 months or 4 months. So, Permanent Secretary, I would want to posit that as the accountable officer, the accounting officer, ultimately responsible to ensuring that internal audit queries were monitored and corrected, sufficient effort was not made so that the ministry was in a position to say, we have cleared. And I'm really hoping when you respond, you will be able to say to me, okay, we had several internal audit memos outstanding. We have been able to identify a total up to the point that it was said you had 60. I'm really not sure at which internal audit report that was. And we have been able to clear X number of internal audit queries. These are still some of the critical areas that we need to work on, or we have dealt with all the critical areas identified from up to 2016, or we are at 2017, or we are at 2018. Where are you in terms of tidying this up? And I would recommend that the response is not just that an audit report register will be put in place, but you're going to go into the process now of doing budgets. It would be wonderful to ask that a compliance manager be added to your structure who takes on the responsibility to liaise between your internal audit, external audit, and yourself and line managers, and be able to document properly for you where you are.
Thank you, Member Holness. I agree with you 100% that ministries and permanent secretaries in particular probably should have someone designated as a compliance manager who assists us to keep on top of some of these audits and audit reports and monitoring and tracking. What I can say to this Parliament is that since the list of 60 has been presented, all matters have been resolved or in the process of resolving. All the issues that were raised, since they have been brought to my attention, responses have been provided to the internal auditor. The internal audit team, I communicated with them last week, I believe it was, and asked them to advise me if there, at this point in time, any outstanding responses from audits, and the response I got was that there is no outstanding responses to internal audits at this time. So,
yes, can I just ask okay, and there's another outstanding question from Member Holness. I'll come into you, Member Sibley's and Member Charles, but just I wanted to find out from the internal audit team what process is followed once they have done an audit and they have completed it internally. What is the internal process there?
Chairman, I would love for my question to be completed because it's very important
for
me
go ahead.
To have an appreciation as to whether or not the minister. Let me tell you why, PS. When anything goes down in government, somebody ends up holding the book. And the face I saw was my minister. I want to know if the minister would have been written to, because I've seen no evidence of such, to say we have these internal control weaknesses, we are working on them, we continue to clear. Even though we may not necessarily continuously write back to the internal auditors, we are actually clearing these queries so that I know if my minister was aware.
Member Holness, the minister, not in all cases, was aware. I will admit it's not a routine practice, but there are areas in the ministry, sensitive areas, that as audits are done, and how should I put it now? As audits are done that are, I'm not sure the right adjective to use right now, but as sensitive audits are done, or matters that warrant probably further and deeper investigation, those were in the past brought to the former Minister of Labour and Social Security. The routine audits with respect to whether the attendance register is being properly maintained and the inventory, those things would not have been brought to the minister's attention.
All right, before I come into you, Member Sibley's, but I just wanted a response from the internal audit in terms of the process that is followed once a report is done and how that is handled internally within the ministry. Could you use the mic? We can't hear. Just pull down the mic too. Okay.
After the audits are completed, Draft reports are submitted to the operational or line managers for their responses. We give them a time, and if the responses are not given within the time, we send a reminder. If we don't get it, as is the case now, we would send out the reports, and the reports are sent to the PS and copied to the relevant bodies, meaning the Audit Committee, Ministry of Finance. After that, follow-ups are done. We normally send out gentle reminders asking them for the management responses. At times, the chairman of the Audit Committee would ask for a listing of the management responses that are outstanding. At that time, if we have received responses, we would take it off that particular list, and as we go along, we update the list and send it to her.
So tell me your process of escalation. After you don't get the responses, you send a reminder, you're still not getting the responses. What do you do in a scenario like that?
In this scenario,
pull the mic to you so we can hear.
Okay. We would send the reports on the different areas, copy to the line manager, and copy to the permanent secretary's email address. So that is the way that she would have been informed. In addition, based on the situation, we might go to her and tell her that we have not gotten any responses, and from time to time, she would call the managers and solicit their management responses.
And it's clear from the reports that generally the management is unresponsive to your findings and your recommendations.
They can be.
They can be, or they are.
Well, they are. They are.
Okay. All right. Member Sibley's, you've been holding for a while.
Thank you, Chair. Madam PS, can you just, for clarity, tell us the reporting relationship with the Chief Internal Auditor and the PS?
The Chief Internal Auditor reports directly to me.
Thank you. And the Internal Auditor, in responding to the Chairman's question as to the report, as to how her reports function within your system, you ultimately would get the Internal Auditor's report. You are confirming that?
Yes, eventually, yes.
All of them?
Eventually, not necessarily initially, but yes, eventually.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Eventually. At some point in the process.
So you get all of them. Thank you. So having gotten all the reports, what system you have in place to ensure that these audit findings are resolved?
Well, this is one of the reasons we had provided additional documentation to show when these audit findings, and in particular when the quarterly reports come to me.
Madam PS, 1 minute. I just want you to explain in a general way, not specific, because I'm going to go into the specific findings here. But I want to know in general terms what system you have in place to deal with audit findings, whether it is the Auditor General, Internal Auditor, a special audit, what system you have in place to resolve findings when they are reported to you, whether initially or at some time, but you would be in the permanent secretary, would receive all audit reports, correct?
At some point in time.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And having that established, I'm asking what system you have in place to deal with audit findings, just generally, and then we can go into the specifics.
Well, generally, when I do get the audit reports, usually my first course of action is usually to either call or meet with the responsible officer in place. We do have, for example, our quarterly meetings where matters of audits and the management general responsiveness to dealing with internal audits are discussed. So we do from a management level, but as I agreed to Member Holness earlier, that maybe the system in place could be strengthened if within the Permanent Secretary's office we have someone that is called a compliance officer that helps a Permanent Secretary. The fact of the matter is, Member, that when these things come, you deal with them, but you don't have a dedicated person sitting down day in, day out, ensuring. So that's the system I have in place, Mr. Sibilis.
Yes, quick direct responses may actually help in the process phase. What's not there, just say it. Because it is obvious when we read the letters that what happened is a message is sent out to the line managers, possibly once again another reminder. But from all the piles of documents we saw, there was nothing in there that showed any sense of communication, meetings to resolve. Even you have quarterly meetings with line managers. There is nothing there that says on the agenda item is the discussion of outstanding audit queries and resolution of audit queries. So there is no sense that there was any importance placed on structuring, documenting, following up, and resolving the internal audit issues. It was just done as you went along, but not in a structured, forcible way. And it is better to just say it as it is, and then we move on to the next thing.
Because to add to that, I know the Auditor Generals, how they tend to audit, like most auditors. They would have asked for minutes. Having asked for minutes, they would have seen where matters of the internal auditors were dealt with. And therefore, their findings would not have been so, unless we are hearing that now, this inference then, that the Auditor General inadvertently had not asked for the minutes of management meetings. And it is only minutes of management meetings that you will see a number of these queries being made, persons being held accountable. But to follow up on the question, Madam PS, have anyone in your management that reports to you have been held accountable for not responding to the internal auditor? We talk about 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Not even the Auditor's General report was answered in a timely manner. Has anyone been held accountable? Because you are the Chief Executive Officer of the ministry. It is you where the buck stops. Have anyone been held accountable?
Member, I am not aware of the ministry not responding to the Auditor General since 2016. I am really not aware of that. Right? And I will make that clear. Let me clarify.
Let me clarify. Mm-hmm. I said 2016 with regard to the internal audit.
I thought report. I heard you say the Auditor General since 2016.
The annual Auditor General report came in 2020. I stand corrected. And it was not until the chairman of the PAC had made a statement here at the PAC to say that the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is yet to respond to the Auditor General's report. That we see any response. In fact, Madam PS, the emails, there's a document that marks 3.2.118, a number of letters, and most of them are dated January 22nd, 21st, there's one dated January 22nd, one dated January 21st, and so on. I say to you, Madam PS,
member,
I'm wanting to find out from you. The question is, though, Madam PS, has anyone, any of your line officers, been held accountable by you for their non-response to the audit or any audit?
Member, the ministry has a process, and I want to assure this House that in some instances, while there may not have been a written response to some of the internal audit findings, it does not mean that issues were not addressed. I'm going to give you an example, member. When I took over the ministry in 2015, member, can I answer?
Go ahead, PS, and
when I
answer.
took over the ministry in 2015, the ministry was behind 8 years in its appropriations accounts. 8 years. Today, we are fairly current. The 2019-20 appropriations accounts were submitted to the internal auditor in September 2020. I'm going to admit, member, that there were weaknesses in the ministry. We did not have a properly functioning procurement unit. The officer in charge of procurement, for some of you who know levels in government, was an AM2 supported by 2 RIM1 officers.
But Madam PS,
So sometimes,
hold 1 second. Just allow her to respond. Allow her to respond.
Member, ministries are given not the adequate resources in terms of human personnel in order to meet some of the targets. I don't know about money sitting down. I don't know about money sitting down.
Hold on,
Today, as we speak, in 2019, we got approval for a procurement unit to be established. That's less than 2 years. We need to recognize that over the years, things were not perfect. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that things are perfect within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. But what I will tell you is that under my stewardship, we have been working to strengthen and improve the internal systems within the ministry.
All right, hold on, Member Sibley.
Chairman, my question has not been answered. And my question to the PS is, has anyone been held accountable? Because, you see, Madam PS, the auditing function exists in organization, both private and public organization, for a good reason. Right? And I'm asking you, which you have not answered, Madam PS, is, have you held anyone accountable? Because I'm going to go into the specifics.
All right, allow her to answer, please. Allow the PS to answer.
Member, if you're talking about matters that through audit that have come to my attention where there have been clear breaches, then yes. There have been instances where matters have been reported to higher authorities to further certain investigations.
But that is not the question. The question is, has anyone been held accountable, not for breaches, because we are not there yet. I'm not there yet, certainly. Has anyone been held accountable for not responding? to the audit points?
Persons have been spoken to and written to about it.
And those would form part of their file that would go to HR, etc.?
It would have.
Okay. The
Not
challenge.
necessarily part of that.
The challenge, PS. Hold on one second, member Sibley's. PS. The challenge, PS, is that having received these documents, you must understand that the litany of outstanding responses to the internal audit, 16 one case, 19 another case, your own internal auditor saying, well, not saying, my words would be, there seems to be a culture of non-responsiveness on critical issues. You must understand why members are deeply concerned about what seems to have been taking place at the ministry over an extended period of time. And the responses seem now to have been brought about because, in a sense, the public spotlight has been shone on the ministry of late. So that is the difficulty that members are having, that we see an Auditor General's annual report tabled here. The Auditor General herself and the department can speak. Clearly, we're not happy with the way the ministry responded to its own internal audit. Now we're seeing a set of documents coming, but frankly, these should have been provided some time ago to satisfy the Auditor General that the outstanding issues were being resolved. As Member Holness said, there should be a catalog which says, all right, of the 60, we have done 58, there are 2 outstanding, etc., etc. But in the absence of that, we can only form a conclusion that management really did not take the internal audit function seriously.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak for me and as a permanent secretary, the importance that I place on internal audit and the role of internal audit. The internal auditor is here, she can speak for herself, right? But I use internal audit as a management tool to help me to understand in many instances the weaknesses in a particular area. So sometimes the line manager may not have provided an individual response because they can't respond. But we have addressed through changing procedures, through changing personnel, training people, because sometimes people are not following something, sometimes not because they deliberately want to, Mr. Chairman, but sometimes out of ignorance. And certainly I use internal audit. So I take real exception to the Parliament and the people thinking that I, as permanent secretary under my stewardship in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, does not take internal audit important.
All right, PS, what I would say, and I'm going to now turn over to Member Charles, who has been waiting. She has been waiting. But I would say, PS, in the absence of documentation which shows the response, the conclusion that this committee could, the only conclusion we could draw is that there was a culture of non-responsiveness. Now we're seeing the documents, but up to last week or the week before, the report said 60. There seems to be more outstanding than the 60. In fact, it's troubling that we don't know how many are actually outstanding. There's no other conclusion we could draw in the absence of written documentation. So I don't think you should take exception to that conclusion. I think what needs to be done is a clear path of improvement to ensure where these issues are raised, there is documentation to say that they have been resolved. But the Auditor General clearly was dissatisfied with how the ministry responded to internal audit. But Member Charles, you've been waiting patiently.
Chairman, can I say something?
Yes, yeah.
That list of 60 was not brought to my attention prior to the Auditor General's report. Mr. Chairman, I got the annual report from the chair of the Audit Committee in September. It came to my office in August. I was on vacation leave. I came back to office in September. I got that report, and most of the issues identified which was for 1920. Now the financial year ended in March. When I went through that, I looked at it and I said, but many of these things have been resolved. For example, Mr. Chairman, many of the things related to the asset register, and there were repeated things, because if the auditors went to the auditor went to the St. Anne office, it was the same finding listed. They went to St. Mary, it was the same finding listed. What we have done since then, we have placed additional persons in that area. We have gone through, and that was done during the financial year 2019-20.
But let me just ask, PS,
when we got that report, I communicated. So I may not have an email and I may not have minutes. Member, I'm sorry, I don't take minutes of all the meetings I have with my management team. But if I meet with an individual manager, member, I do not necessarily have a minute.
Yes.
We discuss the things.
1 second. Let me let her just finish. Let her finish.
Have you ever written a letter? Have you ever had any letter written, even once, that outlines any outstanding internal audit queries and how they were cleared? Because it would appear that the structure within the ministry never had a mechanism of being accountable for any outstanding queries. Normally what happens when you get the queries, you write your responses. Do you have proof of even once, 1 year, 2016, 2017, 2018, to say, guess what? When we got it, here it is. We went through and we sort of resolved these issues, couldn't resolve these issues, and we responded. Have you ever responded? Because what you're saying, if you have never responded, is, and you said it, we treat the internal audit as our personal internal management tool. We did not realize that a critical part of the function is for us to also treat the internal audit as a report on us internally, though we are doing it internally, and one which we must document how we managed it and copy it back to the audit committee and copy it to the minister in charge of the ministry, so that everybody is in the loop in terms of the weaknesses identified internally.
Member, when an audit report comes to my attention, it will cover different areas. And in those instances, I will call and discuss with the particular line manager some of the weaknesses identified. And we will discuss how are you going to address, how are we going to address some of these deficiencies identified. And we discuss it, right? And in many instances, but as I said, member, I am not going to mislead the parliament. I said it. We do have a challenge in the ministry with some of the line managers not responding
but there's
in
no,
a timely manner.
Member Holness, 1 second.
Myself, Sibley's, Chairman, that's not the question. What you're doing is to disaggregate the concerns by arguing that they relate to different line areas and different line managers. But the crux of it is, you got one internal audit report. It is always going to cover several areas in the ministry. It is always going to cover different line managers. But the question is, at any point in time, do you take it in a structured way, where you say, these are our internal audit queries, these are the responses. If I get an audit report or letter asking me 20 different questions, I am still going to be saying, these are the 20 questions, these are the 5 I can answer, these are the 5 that I can't resolve, these are the 10 that I've resolved. So that's the question. Have you ever in that structured way? So if the answer is no, say it, and then we know now going forward that there is a better appreciation that internal audit is not just for me, the manager personally, for me to improve, but also for me to say to my minister, for me to say to the audit committee that is going to look back at me, for me to say to the Auditor General that this is the progress that we have made so far. Just get to it, PS, and just tell us straight if that is the case. If that's the case, we move on to another point. because it doesn't make sense that we keep asking you the same question.
Well, member, I am trying to answer the question the best way I know how. And that is when it comes on to internal audits, and that is why I was at the beginning made the distinction between internal audit and external audit. When it comes on to internal audit, the internal auditor, at first, it is the line manager's responsibility to respond. When it is escalated and it gets to my level, it is usually after some time has passed. Or, as I said before, if during the course of an audit something is so egregious, the auditor will bring it to my attention, right? And we will respond. When the quarterly reports or the annual reports come to my attention, what I am explaining is what I do. I will call the line manager. We will discuss it at that point in time.
All right, Member Charles, you've been waiting a long time. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. PS. Good morning, PS.
Good morning.
You know, everyone has their own leadership style, you know? And I feel like your leadership style is what the light is being shined on right now. Everyone says the buck stops with you. So I'm going to pull back and ask you about procurement. You're in charge of procurement, right?
Not directly.
Does it fall under your...
There is a unit, the administration unit, that procurement is a subunit under administration.
Section 9 of the staff order speaks of the role of the PS. You know the role of the PS, so the Section 9. December 2017, the internal audit report revealed that deficiencies in procurement practices. The procurement committee minutes were not properly maintained. Minutes were not presented to confirm that the committee approved procurement of goods for services up to $54 million. Between April 2017 and December, payments totaling $50 million were made to 5 suppliers, and no contract at all was seen. Can you explain to me why there was no contract? And if after this year, you now have minutes from a committee that can back up and confirm that the committee approved these procurements. This is very important to me. Please tell me that.
Okay. Thank you, Member Charles. It is my understanding that there were minutes of the procurement committee. However, the minutes or the files were not properly maintained at the time. Since then, the files are properly maintained. The documents are enclosed. The contents are minuted, right? That was in 2017. We got approval from the Ministry of Finance in December 2018, and in 2019, we set about recruiting for procurement personnel to properly staff the procurement unit of the ministry.
So you currently have that in place?
It is currently in place, yes.
So persons now will have valid contracts that we can see?
The ones that were mentioned, member, in the report, we are currently in the process of procuring or may have signed contracts for some of them.
Okay.
All right, hold on. Let me just say the order. Member Guy, Member Williams, Member Clark, and Member Sibley's.
Thank you, Chairman. PS, I want to go back to the first part of the questioning, and I'll also seek the AG's intervention in this particular part. It is reported in 32131 that In response to AUGD's inquiry, the MLSS advised that draft responses were submitted to the PS Permanent Secretary in September 2015 and the Chief Internal Auditor and Chairman of the Audit Committee in November. Further to the matter of the outstanding management response was brought to management's attention annually by the Chairman of the MLSS Audit Committee. However, the matter was not addressed. Chairman, I think, is Ms. Kate Bertram of that committee, and I gather she's here. But AG, of whom did you or your team make that inquiry? Because it would help, and it would help further in support of the point made by Member Holness about the need for the ministry to have compliance manager or someone in whichever area looking after these. Now, the question is, AG, who gave that information to the Auditor General's Department? And secondly, could the chairman of the Audit Committee indicate that if these matters were brought, whose attention they were brought to, and then PS, you probably could answer, as per the AG's report, why they were not addressed. But something strikes me as in furtherance to this question, Chairman. Was there never an exit audit done? Because we are now understanding that many of the things that the AG's department required, whether they were acted on or not, but part of the concern of AUGD was that there was no response, and now the committee is being given this tome of documents which suggests that there are actually responses to some of the queries. It was just that it was not given to the Auditor General's Department. So wasn't there an exit audit done, and weren't all of these concerns brought to the attention of the persons in the ministry who you interfaced with? And why is it, therefore, that it is only after the tabling of the report we are seeing that the documents that your department required in many instances are now being tabled?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the paragraph quoted by Member Guy, 3.2.131, actually makes reference to a report, a previous report that was published by the department in 2016. And in that report, we highlighted the fact that there was a systemic issue relating to the non-responsiveness of management to the internal auditor's findings. So what we did in communicating the issues raised by the audit committee, we made reference to our report that was made in 2016 to indicate that this is not a new matter. So the paragraph here is really referring to that report that we would have issued in 2016, highlighting the fact that the ministry's management was non-responsive to the findings of the internal auditors. And we made that point just to reinforce what the audit committee was trying to bring across, that that problem still exists. So it is not in relation to these findings, but reference to a report and an audit that we would have done prior to.
Sorry.
You're clouding the issue in my mind even further. Are you saying, therefore, AG, that those issues that were raised in your report were actually addressed or have been addressed? The report of 2016, which raised certain issues that were outstanding as far back as 2011, right? Are you saying, therefore, that those were addressed? And if they were, when were they addressed? Because you made a reference to them. Are we, as a committee, to understand that those have remained outstanding to the point of your report last year, which is the one we are dealing with now, or you made passing reference to them that it took 5 years for those matters to be settled.
Now, remember, the reference is not to issues that we would have identified. The point being made is that we saw where internal audits would have been done, and there were no evidence submitted that management had responded to these internal audits. So that was the point being made in the report.
Which I believe has been confirmed, which is that there has been an absence of a paper trail to indicate if issues have been resolved and how they have been resolved, which I think has been confirmed by the PS and something which going forward has to be corrected.
But remember, I'm a little perplexed because the NIS audit of 2016, we responded to the Auditor General and we provided 3 responses to this Parliament. So I'm not sure if I am clear as to.
Well, I'll allow.
And I think I need clarity.
Okay. Well,
to understand the issue.
Go ahead, AG.
Right. So, as I indicated earlier, Mr. Chair, the issue is not one of responsiveness to the Auditor General. The issue is one of responsiveness to the internal auditors, the ministry's internal auditors. And what we pointed out in that 2016 report was that there was a deficiency with regard to the management's responses to the internal auditors. Yes, the ministry would have responded to the report that was tabled, but what we did in tabulating the latest reports from the audit committee was to make reference to that finding, indicating that this matter of non-responsiveness is not new. It is something that would have existed from 2015, 2016.
And I think it is clear from all the reports that this is an issue. What we have to determine is how we fix it going forward. And it's clear that there has to be documentation. If issues are resolved from the internal audit reports, they are formally documented. They can be logged, and an idea, we can have an idea if it's 60, 45 have been dealt with, 15 are outstanding. But there's an, hold on.
Mr. Chairman,
but there's an absence of that.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Let me admit we do not have an internal audit register, and we will. I am giving my commitment. As a matter of fact, my office has spent the last several days calling around to find out what and how we structure this internal audit register. We will put that internal audit register in place to be able to better track and monitor. What I want to assure the House is that 60 outstanding responses does not mean that over the years, line managers have not been responding to audits.
Okay. All right, hold on, Member Holness, hold on. Member Williams been waiting a very, very long time.
that responds to the audit report that you got. I realize that is lost in the discussion. So if a report is dated 30th of December, the response must be to the report dated 30th of December. So whatever the line issues raised were, the response speak to that particular internal audit report and the issues raised. And then you move on, and then you move on. Because what it does, it allows you not to be in a place where you hear you have 60 issues. It ensures that the issues that you have unresolved are the issues that continue to be carried forward. And they would be able to highlight that there are long outstanding issues if that's the case. But your situation would look far more improved because you're saying that you actually have been working on the issues, clearing the issues, but nothing has been communicated. And PS, we want you to understand that as the responsible and accountable officer, your internal audit queries and the process that you apply is not your personal management tool. It is actually a management tool for the government, right from the external auditors, and for the minister as well, and for you as the permanent secretary, and for your audit committee and your internal auditor. So when you take it in that light, you will understand your responsibility in structuring and documenting the process that you apply. And I will be looking out for the requests for that compliance manager, and we will be supporting it from this side when it comes for you to have that structure, because I know it is virtually impossible for a permanent secretary to run up and down and follow up all the individual issues. But it is critical that it is done so that you know where major weaknesses lie, because those weaknesses are the weaknesses that come back to us in terms of fraud, in terms of misappropriation or misallocation of funds, and so much more. And that's why it is critical.
All right, member, let me just say the order. Member Williams, Member Clark, and then Member Sibley's.
Yes. My query is directed to Madam Permanent Secretary. In reviewing the report of the Auditor General, the specific issue, non-adherence to GOJ guidelines on budget reallocation persists. That was an observation or a concern raised by the Auditor General at 3.2118 of the report. 3.2118 of the report. Now, the finding there is that contrary to the guideline, and I'm reading toward the end of the paragraph there, the specific conclusion or finding, that contrary to the guideline, MLSS did not obtain the requisite approval for the reallocation of 36.36 million to facilitate excess expenditure on objects 21, 23, and 24. Now, objects 21 speak to compensation of employees, 23, rental of property and machinery, and 24, utilities and communication services. And now, so I want to ask a question of you, Madam PS. When did you become aware, if at all, the government of Jamaica's guidelines that required ministries to seek approval from Parliament for the reallocation of funds to these objects?
For Object 21, that was a new guideline that was implemented in 2015-16 financial year, and for Objects 20, the other objects, it was in the following financial year.
So, my question to you is this. How did you become aware of these objects, these guidelines? Were they issued to you through a ministry circular?
It would have
Did you receive an email?
It would have been through a circular.
Through a circular. Now, what's the normal procedure when a permanent secretary receives such a circular from the Ministry of Finance? Is it circulated to your principal financial officer and the members of your accounting team?
Yes.
Your departments?
Yes, and the other relevant officers who that particular circular may be applicable to.
And the reason it is circulated to them is for them to familiarize themselves with the government policy as it relates to reallocation of budgetary, well, in a sense, it creates control over it ensures that the ministry stays within budget. Correct? That's the essence. You would agree that that's the rationale behind the guidelines.
That particular guideline, Member Williams, was to restrict ministries from moving monies, because as permanent secretary, you can reallocate under certain objects. Prior to that, you are free to reallocate between any object, as a matter of fact, or any activity within your budget. When 2015 and that new circular came about, we were not allowed to do that. Now, member, this is something that we are not proud of. The ministry, there was an issue in terms of where staff were classified. If you look through the ministry's budget and the different activities, you will see a myriad of activities.
Yeah,
what happened at the time is that persons were not classified or placed under their appropriate cost center.
I understand, Madam Pierce, because I read your comments. But my question to you, and this is where I have a concern. There is a government guideline in relation to the reallocation, restrictions on reallocations under certain conditions. You were familiar with the guidelines, correct?
Yes, I became familiar with the guidelines when it came out.
Your staff was familiar with the guideline, correct? Your principal financial officer, he would have received the circular, correct? So, would you agree with me that this reallocation approval was not sought for, was done subsequent to you becoming aware of the guidelines?
It would have had to, yes.
So, Madam Pierce, you were aware of the guideline in relation to government, in relation to reallocation under these specific headings. So, because you have some leeway to reallocate, but under compensation of employees, you don't. Under rental of property and machinery, you don't. Utilities. So under certain objects, you don't have, prior approval has to be given by the ministry. You are aware, your financial officer was aware, your accounting department was familiar with the policy, yet the Auditor General is saying that based on the total here, if we were to look at it on an aggregate basis, almost $80 million, 40.45 plus 36.36 million were reallocated in violation of the ministry's guidelines. So, Madam Pierce, I'm just looking at it carefully and saying to myself, this seems to have been, it's reasonable to conclude that you and your financial officer, your team, acted in flagrant violation of the guidelines because you were aware. You had mens rea. We can't plead ignorance. So this allocation, how was it done when you all were aware of the guidelines?
Member, I pointed out that the ministry was 8 years behind in its appropriations accounts. And the ministry not having, this is one of the reasons the ministry needs to have current appropriations accounts that tells you exactly where the expenditures are taking place. I'm advised that at the time, the appropriations accounts were 8 years behind. The ministry made significant attempts to bring the appropriations accounts current and up to date. It is not that the ministry wanted to operate in violation of the guidelines. Staff had been employed to the ministry and were being paid in the incorrect cost center. Should we have continued to pay them incorrectly where their cost center is not, or should we have sent them home?
Madam
These are some of the...
P.S., hold on.
Okay,
One second. P.S., respectfully, I don't know that that can be the appropriate response, or send them home. I think there has to be an acknowledgement that, as you have said, there were errors in how the ministry did its internal processes there, and the steps being taken to correct it. But the option can't be that one or the other, that because there's an error, you're alluding to sending staff members home. No, that can't be the approach. The approach is we recognize there's a problem, we're going to put in place systems to correct it, and we're going to address it. But it can't be. It can't be that you're, hold on members, because I have a queue of colleagues here who have been waiting. I have a queue. Member Williams, you turn off your mic. All right, go ahead, member.
Yes, sir, Chair. Thanks very much. And I'm saying as well, sir, Chair, in order for us to fix the issue, Mr. Chairman, we have to analyze PS that we have erred. It needs correcting, so to give the avenue to fix the issues and the structures that are at hand. What I'm getting is that, you know, you're saying that you inherited, rightly so, a ministry without certain audit being done, but at the end of the day, PS, you're the accounting officer, you have inherited it. You have to take it onto yourself and put structures in place. But I'm not getting that we realize the issue at hand and we're willing to put structures in place to correct the issues.
Member, that is why I said to you that one of the first things we did was to set about to try and bring the appropriations accounts up to date. And today, as I sit here, the ministry is current with its appropriations accounts. The 1920 appropriations accounts are with internal audit reviewing for onward submission to the ministry, to the Auditor General. So I am not, forgive me if I'm not coming across clear enough to you, but I thought I was explaining to you some of the steps we have taken to ensure that some of these breaches that we would not have wanted to commit, why we ended up being in the situation we found ourselves back in 2015, 2016 financial year.
Hold on, Member Charles. Member Clark has been waiting a long time and has wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Madam PS, Section 9 of the staff order, you're aware of that?
I would have to have the book in front of me, member.
Well,
I don't remember the staff order out the top of my head.
Section 9 of the staff order speaks to the PS role. The buck stops with you. I've been hearing a lot of going around and sidestepping and all of that, Madam PS. Where we are here to make things right for John public. So you have to come direct to us. I'm a bit not comfortable with the sidestepping of the question that are directed at you. I expect to hear a direct answer from you, madam, with all due respect. You made mention of lagging behind 8 years, but whose responsibility is that? That is the responsibility of the PS, the permanent secretary, who is in charge of that ministry. You are the captain of the ship. If Scully and Bondong ship captain get blamed, and therefore, madam, today, you have to sit in the hot seat and take the blame. I can't be here, sitting here and listening to you telling me that it is that staff member. No. When you come here, it is not that staff member again. It is you, because I am asking the question of you. How often do you have heads of department meeting? Because if you have heads of department meetings on a regular basis, these things that are before us, you would have long been aware of it. And there are other recourses that can be taken. It is, if you don't do it, then we are going to blame. What I need for you, what I need from you was to hear you saying that you have done this and you have done that, but you're not getting anything. I'm not hearing it. I'm not hearing it. And it is very sad that in this year, 2021, we are here when we're supposed to be dealing with other matters, because, Mr. Chairman, the meeting are reached nowhere yet,
No, I'm aware, but this issue we have to resolve.
So it seems that, exactly. So it seems that the PS will have to take some time out of our busy schedule and come back here for the next 3 meetings.
Well, there are a number of we haven't reached the substantive matters. We're dealing with an issue which is critical because it has been flagged, and there's clearly a breakdown in processes that need to be fixed and resolved going forward. But there are a whole set of other substantive questions.
And so, Mr. Chairman, because there is so much ineptitude and breakdowns, you find that the problems that we want to address, it is the main root cause of it, Mr. Chairman. And it is sad that persons out in the wider circle, out in John public domain, thinks that it is the minister at all times. And it is not the minister. And I'm speaking right across the board. The permanent secretary is in charge of administration of the ministry. Therefore, if she runs up into a blockade, the next move is to your minister. You must have dialogue, you must have communication, you must have a relationship. And I find that the minister, and you have been a minister before, that many a times it is you who John Public draw over the coal. And it is sad. It is not supposed to be. Not what I'm hearing here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Clark. Let me just say the order. Member Sibley's, Member Carencia, Member Wilson, and then Member Charles. All right? Good. Oh, Member Holness, you come after. But there are a number of members who haven't spoken as yet, who have been waiting to make a contribution.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Pierce, the Audit Committee, in its report, I am seeing a date of July 19, 2019. On page 2, under the heading, the quality of internal audit and management quarterly report in accordance with government guidelines. The second paragraph under that heading reads, "It is the opinion of the Audit Committee that the Internal Audit Department was too involved in the operational activities, especially as it relates to the volume of work they did in reviewing outstanding appropriation account, which had significant errors." Madam Pierce, I find in your responses, your current responses, it is punctuated right across your responses, where in order to resolve some of the audit points, you are asking the internal auditor to do certain things. And I'm wondering if you would have read this letter from the Audit Committee, which clearly said that the role of the internal auditor is not an extension of management, you know. And what we are seeing in your responses is using the auditor as an extension of management. And where I'm going to point to one of them, and because I understand one of the critical issues that is happening in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is corporate governance failings. And on the page with regards to the internal auditor, where it says management's response after the tabling, this report I'm talking, okay? The first page of this report, the report that speaks to Auditor General's assessment of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security internal audit report. That's the report I am speaking to. And the third paragraph, it says, the Chief Audit Executive, that's what CAE means, I am taking it, has since been reminded to include the appropriate program and divisional directors in the audits and the report, as well as to submit monthly report to the accounting officers. That is not the way the internal audit functions, you know, in any organization. After the internal auditor has writes his or her report, it is the chief executive officer or the chief financial officer or the directors, whatever you want to call the senior persons in an organization, or to document the recommendations that are accepted and follow through on it. The auditor is to be left to do follow-up audit or to do audit based on the risk assessment. Just to follow through on your response to Member Williams with regards to the finding one under the appropriation account heading. The substance of the reason for the reallocation, which was not approved by the Ministry of Finance, you stated was because the appropriation accounts were behind by 8 years. Correct? That's the substance of the reasons that you stated. But Madam PS, in your response to the Auditor General, you never stated it. You never cited that as a reason. The reason you gave was one of the part of is that you had you wanted to seek advice about the change, about this new guideline about appropriating or reallocation of the budget. It was never there. So I am finding it difficult at this moment because the Auditor General never got the opportunity to get that response so that the Auditor General would be able to do further work if that is needed to ascertain at the time was the accounts behind so that they can adjust their report or make comment. And so I am asking why it was not included in the Auditor General response to the Auditor General report.
Mr. Sibilis, most of the responses, if you realize, we speak to what it is that the ministry is doing to address the issue. Speaking to the outstanding appropriations account, to be given an explanation as to why. The fact is that the new circular came out, and as we were doing the appropriations accounts, it became more and more clear that the ministry would have been in breach of the new guidelines, and we sought advice as to how we were to treat with this. And that is what we did at the time.
All right, Member Morrison, Carencio.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. P.S. I'm catching on to something that you've repeated more than once about how at the time when you took over, the years with a report where the ministry lagged. And I will just tell you this, P.S. In my constituency, for example, yesterday, there was a demonstration. The people needed roads. I could have had as an excuse, I'm only MP for 5 months. But there was a point yesterday when I realized that you are team leader. You have to answer. You have to reassure them. You have to find a way. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. And therefore, when you wear the crown, you are responsible for all, not some, all liabilities. Doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty. But what it means is that you will have to speak up and to give an explanation as to why particular systems may or may not work. In the same way, had there been any discussion about something positive of national and international acclaim, you know, we would have been commending the PS this morning, and I'm sure that this is an accolade that you would want to, you know, accept. Coming down to specifics, you made mention that there have been instances where a matter may have been escalated to you. There have been instances, and I'm perturbed about the word instances, because when these things are critical, we don't discuss them as instances where individuals have been written to, spoken to. Was there anything that jumped out at any point that struck you as being particularly egregious? Anything at all? And how did you handle it? How would you assess your own stewardship? At what point did you, and Chairman, and this is just in a manner of speaking, at what point was anything escalated to you to the extent where you said, you know what, I have to shut it down now. Nobody moves until I get a clear assessment of this. I will have to drill down to granular. I need to drain the swamp now. Is there any instance where that happened? Because why it is called management, it means that you would have those skills, that art, those refined strategies where you can call out someone and take the necessary action. And the necessary action, I'm right there with you, Chairman, isn't always to fire, isn't always to send people home. So, P.S., I just want, because moving further, as Member Clark has mentioned, we have just scratched the surface. We just want you to bear in mind that you are the accountable officer, and not to appear to waffle in the responses, but to be very targeted and specific. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to address something that seems to be repeated, and at no point in time have I tried to blame others. I spoke about a state of affair that I inherited. I never tried to blame anybody, but I tried to expound upon what the ministry has done to not continue with some of the breaches that would have taken place, some of the corrective measures, some of the organizational changes that we would have done. So members, if that is the sentiments, because Mr. Clark and yourself would have echoed some of that, that was never my intention. I'd never ever said that it is somebody else's fault. I spoke about what was the status of some of the things in the ministry and what we have done over the years to correct them and to strengthen them. You spoke about what have I done. With respect to the appropriations accounts, and I'll go back to it, it was one of the things when I first became permanent secretary, I met with the Auditor General, and it was something that she flagged for me. And I will admit to this committee, accounts was a subject that I never did, right? So I'm not an accountant. I don't understand accounting like some of you. But I recognize that for a ministry to be 8 years behind, it meant that there must be some systemic weaknesses there. And what we realized was that we needed to train some of the very staff in the ministry how to properly prepare the appropriations accounts. It is evidenced by the report that the audit committee sent that said that the internal audit unit was spending too much time dealing with appropriations accounts rather than some of their substantive work. And what did the ministry do? We hired someone on a short-term basis to come in and to help train our staff, to help us. It was short-term, 6 months? For 6 months, to come in and train our staff. How do we prepare the appropriations accounts? What are some of the correct things, right? We did that. Now, back to your question, another part of your question, which was if anything has ever come to my attention. And I will say yes. I'm not going to call any specific area because that particular audit is still going on, or I think the auditor has just last week issued her report. But in December, something came to my attention in a particular area that the ministry provides a subvention to, that they were not managing the subvention in accordance with the correct guidelines. And immediately, when that report came to me, I spoke with the principal financial officer and I said to him, we are not going to send that particular area any more subvention. All their payments, it may end up delaying the system, but all their payments are going to be handled by the main ministry until I can be comforted that they understand proper accounting procedures and how to manage government resources properly. So that is an example, Member Morrison, of something recently that came to my attention, that once it came to my attention, immediately, and this is before the audit report even being issued.
All right, thank you. You have a follow-up?
Yes, a follow-up, PS. By all explanation, admirable in this case, but what is it, this thoroughness that you exercised in this instance? Why is it that in consideration of the volume that is before us, why were you, for want of a better word, derelict in your responsibilities regarding these other matters?
Member, I am not sure that I see where I have been, you could describe my action as derelict. What I do know is what my actions have been, which is to work with the team in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to strengthen the systems, to strengthen the personnel. As I said before in the start, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that things are hunky-dory and we're perfect in the ministry. We're not. And I'm sure some of my staff hearing me are probably not pleased for me to say that, but we're not perfect. We make mistakes. And where we can learn from those mistakes, we try to learn and implement things that will ensure that we don't go down that road again.
Well, a follow-up on this? All right, Member Witter. Use the mic. Just pull down the mic so we can.
Yes. Just a follow-up.
Wilson and then.
It's a follow-up for the PS. I listened to Member Morrison. I was trying to find out from PS. I listened to your response to the question raised. But I would love to find out if you, during this period where you had these challenges in terms of adherence to the procurement guidelines and instructions from the Ministry of Finance, have you ever contemplated any kind of sanctions as it relates to those persons who would have been derelict in their duties?
In terms of specifically what? I'm not sure.
You are the chief for the ministry, and if it is found that persons would have acted outside of the regulations that guide your ministry, I'm asking if you have ever at any time contemplated any kind of sanctions against these persons who would have been.
Persons have been sanctioned in the ministry. Disciplinary hearings have been held for persons in the ministry who have breached certain guidelines.
And what are some of the outcomes as it relates to those sanctions?
Some of the outcome would mean, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but the committee would normally make a recommendation as to what the specific sanction would be, whether it be leave without pay, demotion in rank. There are various types of sanctions that can be had.
I'm not saying what can be had, I'm saying what...
In some, sorry?
No, I know that there are sanctions that can be had, but I want to find out if you have contemplated and imposed any sanctions.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part.
No, you mentioned sanctions that can be had, and I say I understand that, but what I want to find out if during those instances of for want of a better word, improprieties, did you contemplate handing down any sanctions, or if you had done so, and what are some of the sanctions that were imposed?
Yes, and that's what I was trying to explain. Yes, we have. And sanctions that have been imposed, for example, after a disciplinary hearing, persons have been sent on leave without pay, for example. So suspension is the correct terminology, right? Persons in some instances have been reassigned and transferred within the ministry, because sometimes it is incompetence in some instances, but there have been various sanctions that have been applied to persons.
No one was fired, though.
No one has been fired outright. There have been instances, however, where persons would have been close to the end of their contract of engagement and those contracts not renewed, or if, for example, their performance was not up to standard, then they may not have gotten the full gratuity amount, which is payable on satisfactory completion of their tenure.
And those were documented?
Yes, those would be on the various persons' HR file. There's also been demotion of rank. So yes, those would be on the individual's HR files.
Okay.
All right, Member Wilson, Member Holness has been waiting, Charles, and then Member Siblis. And we have to complete our meeting in another 10-15 minutes because the Parliament has to be prepared for another meeting later. It's obvious that we're going to have the ministry back again because the substantive matters we haven't even started. But Member Wilson.
All right, thank you, Chair. Let me start by saying that I went through the report and it was worrying. And P.S., your responses disturbed me a bit throughout the entire session. I find a lot of contradictions. And I wonder why is that, being that you're the head of the ministry in certain regards. Now, the first thing I want to highlight is your role and responsibility in the overall framework of what's being discussed this morning. And I want to find out, in reviewing these internal audits, at what point do you determine that there are issues that needs to be highlighted to your minister? That's my first question.
Usually, as I said before, if there are routine management issues.
No. I want to make this very productive. I don't want it to just babble along. But I want to know at what point, in terms of, I find that there is money is missing, at what point do you escalate internal audit issues to your minister?
Okay, so usually if it is an issue where there is clear breaches involving, for example, misappropriation of funds, where there may be something in terms of what may be an indication of possible fraud taking place, matters that, in my opinion, they may need to be escalated further outside of the ministry for further investigation.
All right, so thanks for that. In your words, you said when you took up the ministry, you found systematic weaknesses. Those are your words. I wrote them down. When you found these systematic weaknesses, did you highlight these to the minister?
These.
And to add to that, you continually allude to these systematic weaknesses as the main cause of certain underperformance in your ministry. So I would determine that these are grave weaknesses. So go ahead.
Yes, I alluded to systematic weaknesses then, and I also spoke to some of what we have been doing over time to improve the internal systems within the ministry.
I'm not asking about what you did. I'm asking specifically, were these systematic weaknesses brought to the attention of your minister?
At the time, they would have been brought to the minister at the time.
When you say at the time, remember?
Since then, we have gone through, I believe, 4 different ministers.
Correct, but this is systematic weaknesses, going back to your word. So even if a new minister comes in, you would automatically brief them and said, hey, Minister, we have some systematic weaknesses here that posing a challenge to the overall operation of the ministry. So the initial stage of just informing one minister who may have moved on would not justify saying, oh, I informed one in 2014 or whatever it is.
I'm sorry, member, I was answering your question. You asked me if when I took over the ministry, if at the time I informed the minister of systematic weaknesses. So I was answering at the time.
So since then, that you wouldn't have informed the minister of these
I
weaknesses?
would have brought to the minister's attention as we work together some of the weaknesses in the ministry, yes. Or some of the challenges that we have within the ministry.
No, not some. This particular one, because it's alluded to a lot.
Which particular one? I'm sorry.
You said that when you took over the ministry.
The appropriations account? Well, that would have been then, as it stands now, I would not see it as an issue now because we are current with our appropriations accounts.
All right, thank you for that.
All right,
one more question. One more question.
You have more questions?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yes, Member Clerk.
The time is now 12:24, and you know we have to wrap up as fast.
No, I said it when you were
sorry.
outside, you know, so I just want the members who have been waiting to ask the questions. We will have to invite back the ministry next week to substantively deal with the matters, but you can just conclude the questions, Member Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My next question pertains to this lovely file jacket that was presented to me on my arrival this morning. I'm not sure how the ministry operates, but presenting us...
No, Member Wilson, I said we would not, given the fact that we just got it today, there could be no expectation that we would go through this document and put us in a position to discuss it. So while it is here, I'm not going to deal with it substantively because none of us would have had an opportunity to go through it.
Thank you, Chair, because I found it disturbing that it was just placed in front of me for this meeting. The other question is following up on Member Williams' comments and questions. As it pertains to the complete wanton disregard for government guidelines, and despite we're not going through the AG report just yet, I see we are in one case, it was a 36.36 million, another case it was 123 million, another case it was 170 million. What would be your defense in saying that the ministry is not following the government guidelines as it pertains to these procurements, or the ministry, as in you are the CEO, not following the government guidelines as it pertains to the allocation of these funds?
Yes, I will add my question to this exact question because that's what I'm waiting for. And if you're not able to answer it thoroughly for us this week, then we're happy to work with next week. I have the concern, even at the time of taking over, with a backlog of appropriations, account issues, making variants, and then, as in one instance, writing 9 months later to consult the Ministry of Finance. So I want to know if at the time there was not an understanding or an appreciation that if we want to do a variant, whether or not it is approved yet, the communication and documentation should have seen us seeing a letter or email or a memo going over to the Financial Secretary first to say we would like to have approved variant for salaries, variant for compensation of employees, it was rental property and machinery, communication services, goods and services, drug, medical, whatever it is. But we are going to ask you to please approve XYZ because we realize that we document them here and we're going to need them here. I am having a challenge in that variants are done, misclassifications are there, but you're not seeing the preemptive effort to get the clarification and to get the direction and to get the approval. Instead, the ministry proceeds and does whatever it feels like. And that means the minister, the financial secretary, and the rest of us better stuff it. Yes, if you need direction, it is non-adherence. The government guidelines on budget reallocation persist, and it actually is a litany of it. It is quite a bit of it. I am very concerned because regardless of the structures and the weakness inside, what I would do is to say right first and say, okay, we have some concerns, we are behind. We know that you have now issued orders requiring us to do so. But this is what we are doing, and we want your guidance and we want permission. And then now you proceed in terms of the quantifying of the figures that you are going to need to process. And so members don't argue that we're going around in circles. If we were at a point that we didn't have a full understanding, if we were at a point that we were just not able to catch up yet, just go straight to it, PS, and say this was our situation. But we have learned from it, because I keep hearing that. I will make sure that I reiterate. There have been improvements, and the PS has indicated that we are now up to date. But because they're speaking about that point in time, I would just say, PS said, look, at that point in time, this was our situation. We learned from it. This was the fix. We are now in a better place.
Yes, member. Thank you very much. And you are correct. That was the situation at that point in time. Unfortunately, it was a breach. It was a breach that we did not recognize when the new environment policy came in, because our appropriations accounts were out. Now that our appropriations accounts are more up to date, I can safely say that since 2017, we have not had any breach in the environment policy. But unfortunately, member, it happened.
Thanks, PS. I really appreciate that response.
All right. Member Charles, then Member Sibley, and we're closing for today after that.
PS, you indicated that you started in 2015 as PS. Where were you before as PS? Where were you before?
Office of the Prime Minister.
And what role did you play there?
Chief Technical Director.
Chief Technical Director. Okay. Because when you see the amount of systemic weaknesses and the blatant disregard for guidelines and principles, I just wanted to know if it was just a lack of experience. I'm just trying to understand why so many balls dropped. Can you give me an explanation about that? What do you think could have happened? No
Member,
letters?
I am not going to attempt to give an explanation. What I will say is that the weaknesses identified through the Auditor General, the Ministry of Finance, internal audit, we have taken those things and we have been working to address them. As I mentioned before, the ministry did not have a procurement unit. So when the laws have been changed around the ministry, we were not equipped to be able to undertake the kinds of procurement. And I'm not making excuses, but I'm just explaining the situation at the time. We now have a procurement unit. So you identify the weakness that has come up, and you have to know within the system, the rules, the guidelines, see how best we can now address those issues as we identify them.
You do understand that it seems like the weakness has a lot to do with the PS herself. You do understand that. I mean, I think that's one of the problems that everyone has. When you respond, it seems like so many other people are to blame. Because I'm unaware of this, and excuse my ignorance, when one becomes PS, Are they trained? Do they understand what their responsibilities are, Chairman? I just want to understand that.
I do believe so, and the PS would have indicated she has served in the public sector in other capacities, and prior to assuming this role, my own view is that she would have an understanding of the role. I mean, she has indicated what the weaknesses are. I know most of us, including myself, find the litany of breaches hard to comprehend and understand over an extended period of time. So there are systemic weaknesses clearly that existed in the ministry, and what we need to get going forward is what is the clear plan of action to address those, and for there to be follow-up to ensure that those things are implemented. But I understand the question that you're asking.
And who holds the PS responsible? The minister? I'm sorry.
Well, you know, I don't know if that is the cabinet secretary. I don't know myself.
Because they're
I think it may be the cabinet secretary. What I believe as a committee we may have to look at in assessments is whether issues such as adherence to internal audit reports are part of an assessment. I don't know if they are, but that is obviously a critical element in terms of assessing and evaluating performance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just want to...
Sibley, you...
I'm going to allow the chairman to summarize, but I just want a commitment from the chairman that next week, chairman, I would like to be in the crease.
You're always early in the crease.
Early in the crease.
And I would say, members,
and I just want to chair, if I may, just to let the PS know the area that I was going to, procurement, so she can prepare her mind to speak to the procurement issue on the internal auditor's sheet, and wherever procurement is punctuated in all the reports, because that is where I want to go next week. Thank you, Chair.
What I would say, members, I have a number of substantive questions, and I assume all members do, that we didn't have an opportunity to go through because of what we might identify as systemic weaknesses. We have also been presented with other documentation, which I think is important for the Auditor General to go through this and indicate to us whether it answers or deals with any of the outstanding issues, because frankly it's difficult for us as members to go through this and make an assessment in terms of the outstanding issues. So again, I know it's more work for the Auditor General, but we need to be guided as to whether this plus other documentation that you would have received recently addresses the outstanding issues that you have raised. And we will come back next week and substantively deal with the reports that are here. Yes,
just want to add to the chairman's point. I'm not sure if the AG's office would help with it, or if the ministry officials at the PS would be able to have it done, so that we can get beyond the issue of the outstanding internal audit queries and the outstanding queries or concerns from the AG's office. Could someone within the ministry or the AG's office just do a quick tabulation? The issues don't even have to be reworded in detail, just a short sentence as to what the issue was: cleared, resolved, 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 outstanding, outstanding. Because that way we would now have a better appreciation as to how much improvements we have had and resolution of issues, and what remains outstanding for the Ministry of Labour Social Security to clear or to resolve going forward. I think that would sort of move us along faster in terms of addressing the substantive issues and breaches.
All right. Deputy AG.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add that in relation to the findings of the Auditor General's Department, the current status is included in the prompt. In relation to the matters raised by the internal auditors, those responses would have to be provided to the internal auditors, and I would expect that they would do their own verification to address the concerns that they would have raised going forward.
PS, yeah, so I want to say and I think the ministry should provide this, just give us a table which outlines of the outstanding issues, the progress, resolved, in progress, where you are, so that we don't come back to this again next week.
Chairman, the Chief Internal Auditor would have to put that together.
Sure, yeah, the Chief Internal Auditor. Also, PS, the committee clerk has indicated that a number of other documents which were provided to the Parliament today, they're not here. I don't know how we are to treat with those. I am told, is that for our attention? No? Okay, all right. All right, so members, I'll ask you, Deputy AG, for next week, if you could give us an update based on the new information, and we'll come back next week to substantively deal with the issues that have been raised in the report.
Chairman,
thank you very much.
Chairman, could you also send us, because I don't think we're going to be able to complete all the things in one session, and it may be better for the flow, if we're going to take NIS or we're going to take PATH, could you, because it is just so voluminous, it would be good if we structure and say, well,
sure,
next week we're going to start with, and then we're going to go to. It helps the PS and the team to be ready, and it helps us to structure our questions so that we're not all over the place.
All right, well, those two are very substantive issues, PATH and NIS. So could we agree that we take PATH next week, and then we may have to come back the following week to look at the National Insurance Fund? Okay? Can I have a motion? And I'm not saying it's only 2 meetings, because I don't know whether we will complete all before the completion of the 2. But let's start there, and then we see how we progress. Can I have a motion for the adjournment? So, no, hold on. Are we saying PATH? I'm proposing PATH next week and NIS next. No, you're saying, Member Sibley's, you want procurement next week as well?
So we're going to try to do
PATH and the procurement issues, although some of the procurement issues will cover other areas, right?
And Sir Chair, then we...
Let's take PATH and then take NIS, and then what we do, if there are issues still related to procurement when we're done, we take the procurement issues not covered on the PATH, not covered on the NIS.
And you're talking about, I don't think we're going to cover those next week. We're going to need another meeting, maybe
and
2 more. So that's why I'm saying let's try to deal with PATH next week with some of the procurement issues, NIS the following week, and then we can see where we are, whether we need to have another meeting after that.
And the farm work program as well.
Sorry?
And the farm work program as well.
The farm work, well, so PATH, NIS, and the farm work program in that order. Can I have...
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Bear in mind that the farm work program was not flagged as an issue in the Auditor General's report. So
I know, but right, subsequent members have raised some concerns. A report was provided to us late last week, and even though it hasn't been, even though it's not coming from your report necessarily, there are some concerns that the members would like answered arising from that. Could I have a motion for the adjournment? Member Miller, seconded by Member Sibley. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.